Swampfox Mike. Welcome to my workbench in Houston, Texas. I'm going to do a short video today giving you my tips and tricks for mounting a low power variable scope onto an AR using our Swampfox hostile engagement rings. Let's get to work. Okay, so where do we start? I've taken the caps off of my rings and I put the ring cap screws in this little magnetic dish so they're hard to lose. You can see I've already mounted these rings once before. You can see the blue Loctite is still on there from last time. Now, low power variables have a lot of eye relief. So I'm going to take this ring and my front ring I'm going to put right on the edge of the AR's receiver, right on the front of the receiver. I don't want to go any further than that and put it on a handguard. Even though this is a nice handguard and it's probably not going to move around, there's a risk that you could lose zero if you put it there. So I put my first ring on the very front slot of my AR's receiver. Now you'll see the underside of this is a square lug, so it has pretty good fitment with your 1913 mil standard Picatinny rail. It should just wiggle a little bit back and forth. Watch. Can you hear that? You can barely even see it. Now, how come we didn't make these bigger and fatter so they would fit perfectly and not wiggle at all? Well, because there's so many cheap receivers out there that are out of spec. We'd be getting a lot of scope rings back from people saying, hey, your rings don't fit my receiver. So a little bit of wiggle isn't too bad. It's actually sadly necessary because there's so many out of spec receivers out there. So what are we going to do? Are we going to pull it back? Are we going to push it forward? My theory has always been that when the gun recoils, it's going to move backwards this way. So there's a force going this way when I shoot. What I want to do is I want to protect myself against a shift in zero from my mount coming loose due to that force. So I'm going to push my ring forward like that before I tighten it down. And I'm just going to go hand tight for now. There we go. Hand tight with my finger, no wiggle, and it's pushed forward against the lug of the Picatinny rail. Now the tricky part is what to do with my second ring here. It's not a one-piece scope mount, so I have to choose where this ring's going to go. I know that because I have a lot of eye relief, I want this scope to be basically as forward as I can possibly go on my AR. So I'm going to put this part of the scope that necks up, gets fatter where the turrets are, I'm going to put it as far forward as I can without actually hitting it. And then I'm going to put this kind of in the middle, just where it looks good. I actually have a little bit of play. I could put it one slot back, one slot forward. I like to put it in the middle there just because it aesthetically looks better. But what I'm trying to do overall is move the arrowhead as far forward as I can get it in the rings without leaving this receiver and moving onto the handguard. Now I generally know where my scope's going to go. I can put the ring caps in place. These are the same on both sides. You can put it that way or you can put it that way. They're not directional. You can't get it wrong. Two things that I want to point out. There's a little piece in here that is a crush material that helps kind of stick everything in place, and it helps you to grab the scope and helps the scope not to slip when you actually have it installed. That's there on purpose. Don't remove that. I find it to be very useful personally. I like it. It also means that with these scopes that are made in matched pairs for precision, there's no reason to lap these scopes. Just go with the squish material and leave it as it is. I don't really believe in lapping the scope rings for this particular application. Another thing I want to point out is that there's a little bit of a gap here. You can see when I just sort of put them down by hand, there's a gap. I don't want to try to make that gap totally disappear or I will crush the living crap out of my scope body. You want an even gap on both sides just because it looks nice, but do not try to make the gap totally disappear on both sides. You will break something. It's there on purpose. Okay, it's time to start dropping screws into place. You can see that I've got blue Loctite on these screws. If I was going to be really serious about it, I would put fresh blue Loctite on there. There's some people who say the Loctite is only truly effective the first time that it's used. Here's your little Swampfox tool that comes in the box. I'm pretty proud of these. It's very nicely made. And I'm just going to get these started, alright? Not even finger tight or anything like that. I'm just getting them started in the threads so I don't lose them. And I'm going to do that for the front rings as well. This is your opportunity to get behind the scope and check your eye relief. Notice that I have the scope set on maximum magnification, 10 power. You want to set your eye relief at maximum magnification of the scope, because that's where it's the least forgiving. If you set your magnification to 1 and you think your eye relief is great and everything is lined up and it works fine, you may find, especially with something that has so much zoom as a 1 to 10, that you didn't get it quite right at 10 power. So it's much easier to set it right here at home on your workbench, set it at maximum, and then you'll find that you're perfect at minimum. Now for the part everybody hates, leveling the scope. I'm going to show you guys the bubble level method. There are a lot of different methods, but the bubble level works well enough for me. This is the Wheeler bubble level set. You can get it online, Amazon, super cheap. There's a magnet in these, but it doesn't really help us in this case because we've got an aluminum scope, aluminum rings, and aluminum receiver. A lot of people will use the top of the rings to be their baseline for leveling. I don't particularly care for that because the rings can lie to you. If they're torqued down one side or another, they can actually, this surface here will tilt left and right, and it's not as precise as it could be. So for my baseline level, I want to make sure that my receiver is level, and you can see that I've got a little rubber band holding my level there so it doesn't fall off. So my receiver is level, I know that, and now I need to level out my scope. What a lot of guys will do is they'll just put it on the flat part of the elevation turret, but that's also not as precise as it could be. That will actually lie to you as well. So one of my favorite tricks that I like to tell people is, here's your Swampfox tool in action there. You can pull off this outer turret like you're resetting 0. Off it comes, and you can see the locking mechanism there for a second. This inner turret is actually attached to the guts of the scope, and it is a much more precise way of telling whether the scope is level or not. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and forth until I get that bubble level where I want it to be, right in the middle. So now I've got a level elevation turret and a level receiver. This is the correct orientation. This is what I'm looking for. Now that I've got the orientation that I want, how do I not screw it up while I'm putting my rings on? My advice to you is take these and make them just basically hand tight and snug, and look for the gap that I mentioned earlier in the rings between the top cap of the ring and the bottom of the ring. Keep that cap level and just make these sort of snug to start with, and watch that this doesn't change while you're doing it. Watch that you aren't actually moving the scope around by torquing these rings left or right. You can cheat it a little bit if you're really good and you do this a lot, by actually torquing the rings in the direction that you want the scope to be moved a little bit. So if I give this an extra bit of tightness, I can actually move the bubble level that way a little bit because I've dragged the scope this way a little bit. I don't know if that's something that's a skill or just luck, but I've seen it happen before. So I'm just going to make these snug for now, and now that they're snug and my scope is still level, I'm going to come back and torque everything down properly. Okay, now's the time to torque things down, and we want to be careful that we don't cant the optic left or right when we do it. There's two ways to do it, the scientific way and the redneck way. We'll do the scientific way first. Here is an inch-pound torque wrench by Wheeler. I'm going to put it on its minimum torque specification, which is 15 inch-pounds. We say 10 inch-pounds on the website, but we'll just have to over-torque these a little bit when we get to 15. I will start out doing the lower left-hand screw, and then I'm going to move to the top right-hand screw, and I'm going to go evenly back and forth, making sure that my bubble level doesn't move. Oh, uh-oh, we're getting close. You hear that? So the way that the torque wrench works is that as you get closer to your final torque spec, alright, that was it. That was 15. Let's try this one. Alright, that was 15. That is the scientific way of torquing down your screws. The redneck way is to take your tool and just turn until it don't turn no more, then stop. Damn it, I said stop. turn until it don't turn no more, and then stop. Now, what happens if I just put crazy monkey torque on that thing and keep turning? With our hardware, I will do this. See if you can see these in focus. I will absolutely strip out a tool. I'll strip out my Torx. My T10 Torx will break before these screws will break. So unless you want to go and try to get another tool from the hardware store, I suggest you don't over torque these too much. Okay, so I've skipped through a bunch of the torquing process, and now I'm basically doing a final check. So I'm going to show you my bubble level here is in the middle of the level. My bubble level up there is in the middle of the level, and I would go through in a crisscross pattern and check every one of these. There's one. There you go. Two. Now this one. Pretty close. Didn't quite get the full beep out of that one. There's the last one. So that's basically a check that everything is torqued up. I would do the same for the front ring, of course. And then when I'm all done, I still have my level here and my level there, right in the middle. That's close enough, kids. That's about as good as it gets. Okay, so I've put my elevation cap back on the outer turret there. I've installed my throw lever since I already had my rifle on my bench, and now I want to double check my torque specs on these. Remember, I just snugged them down by hand earlier. I probably should have torqued them first, but you always do one little thing wrong. I'm going to try to show you how the torque wrench works here. This is a 1/2 inch size nut. See how it counts up as you go. There's 30. 30 is your maximum, check that one too, on these Picatinny rail mount nuts. 30 inch-pounds is what you want to do. And we're done. That's it. Everything's level. Everything's together. Time to set my ocular. Don't forget about setting this little guy before you hit the range for the first time. I'm ready to go shooting with this thing. Thanks for watching today. Guys, you want to subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be making a lot of videos in 2020. We had a really great year last year, and I want to thank all of the customers that we had that gave a new brand a chance. We are coming out with some really cool new products in 2020, and I'm going to be making some cool videos on them. Go out there and be safe at the range, have fun, train hard, and I'm going to go shoot this thing pretty soon.